Most everybody remembers what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13. That's the chapter where he talks about love in such lofty terms. But do you remember what Paul says in the rest of 1 Corinthians, particularly in the chapters that follow? This week and next, I want to walk through the final 3 chapters of 1 Corinthians, partly to get back to the daily lectionary, and partly because what Paul has to say in these 3 chapters speaks volumes about the things the church still needs to hear today. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your Daily Devotional for Tuesday, October 12th, 2021. You'll recall that in the opening sentences of 1 Corinthians 13, Paul talks about the uselessness of deeds done without love. But you'll recall that it's not just any deeds, it is speech, and in particular, a certain kind of speech. He says, "If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal." Tongues. Now, I have to be honest with you. The word in this context kind of creeps me out. We Presbyterians have historically been a little skeptical, if not downright squeamish, about the idea of speaking in tongues. Some of that may be cultural. Rightly or wrongly, we associate the practice of speaking in tongues to less educated Christian sects. Still, it is clearly part of the witness of Scripture that speaking in tongues was a regular part of Christian life in the early church. In today's reading, Paul adds some texture to our understanding of the practice, even as he challenges some of its practitioners. Paul begins 1 Corinthians 14 with the admonition, "Pursue love and strive for the spiritual gifts, and especially that you may prophesy." He goes on in this first part of the chapter to compare the gifts of speaking in tongues to the gift of prophecy, and betrays his preference for the gift of prophecy over tongues. In part, this is because, as he says, those who speak in a tongue do not speak to other people, but to God. Prophecy, on the other hand, is speech to other people. This tells us that the reason Paul prefers prophecy to speaking in tongues is because of how it builds up the church. Those who speak in a tongue, he says, build up themselves, but those who prophesy build up the church. Now he really cuts to the chase. Listen to this part of 1 Corinthians 14. "Now, brothers and sisters, if I come to you speaking in tongues, how will I benefit you unless I speak to you in some revelation or knowledge or prophecy or teaching? It is the same way with lifeless instruments that produce sound, such as the flute or the harp. If they do not give distinct tones, how will anyone know what is being played? And if the bugle gives an indistinct sound, who will get ready for battle? So with yourselves, if in a tongue you utter speech that is not intelligible, how will anyone know what is being said? For you will be speaking into the air. There are doubtless many different kinds of sounds in the world, and nothing is without sound. If then I do not know the meaning of a sound, I will be a foreigner to the speaker, and the speaker a foreigner to me. So with yourselves, since you are eager for spiritual gifts, strive to excel in them for the building up of the church." What Paul has done here is kind of neat. In chapter 13, he talked about tongues in relation to love. Here he talks about it in terms of building up the church. Has he changed the subject? Has he shifted his focus? Not one bit. For Paul, love is the necessary ingredient in the building up of the church. More than that, building up the church here is the real point. For Paul, whatever happens in the church that doesn't serve to build it up is worthless. It may be grand and impressive, but worthless nevertheless. And if it doesn't serve to build up the church, but only serves to show off one's spiritual gifts, then it betrays a lack of regard for others, a lack of love. What is so interesting here, then, is not even so much what Paul says about speaking in tongues per se, it is about what he says about the connection between love and the health of the church. A church that has all the technical competencies in the world, all the greatest programs, but fails to demonstrate love is not worth much. But a church that stumbles around a little bit but is filled with love is a church that is worth its weight in gold. Tomorrow, Paul associates speaking in tongues with a less mature faith. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.